All right, welcome back. Let's begin. This is an original story from Hidden Revenge Family, and it took a turn you truly didn't see coming. Let's get into it.
I walked through the front door of the Vance estate with a duffel bag over my shoulder and dust still ground into the seams of my uniform. Charleston humidity hit me first, thick and sweet, like it was trying to pretend nothing ugly had ever happened in this house. The valet paused for half a second when he saw me, not long enough to apologize, just long enough to decide I wasn't important. That was familiar. The dining room was already full. Crystal glasses, low laughter, the kind of music people play when they want to sound cultured without listening to it. My sister Cassidy stood near the center like she owned the air itself. Perfect hair, perfect smile, phone angled just right even indoors. She was mid-story something about brand deals and authentic engagement when she noticed me. She looked me up and down, slow, deliberate, like she was reviewing a product she'd never buy. Well, she said loud enough for the room if it isn't our hometown hero. You smell like jet fuel and bad decisions. A few people laughed. Not hard. Polite laughs. The kind that say we don't know what's funny, but we know who we're supposed to agree with. I didn't answer. I set my bag down by the wall. The fabric brushed against imported marble that cost more than my first year in the Navy. Cassidy tilted her wrist so the lights could hit her watch. Diamond bezel, heavy, loud, new. Do they still pay you in government coupons, she went on, or did they finally upgrade you to real money? My mother. Elena cleared her throat like she was doing me a favor. Leah, sweetheart, we're so glad you came. But maybe the kitchen table would be more appropriate tonight. You know how formal this dinner is. She said it the way people talk to dogs. Gentle voice, sharp meaning. My father Gordon didn't even look at me. He was focused on a man to his left, some investor with a pinky ring nodding along to something about coastal property values. When Gordon finally turned, his eyes flicked over my uniform and moved on. You could have changed, he said. This isn't exactly your environment. I nodded once, not because I agreed, because arguing would have wasted oxygen. I took a step toward the hallway instead. Cassidy's voice followed me. Careful back there, she called. Try not to track mud into Dad's office. Some of us like to keep things nice. That office had been sacred once, before my real father died, before this house became a showroom. I pushed the door open and the smell hit me immediately. Old books, leather, gun oil faintly trapped in the wood grain. Colonel Vance had believed in maintenance, tools, history. He'd believed objects mattered because of what they represented, not what they cost. The display case against the far wall was still there. Mahogany, hand-polished. The glass should have caught the light just right. It didn't. I stepped closer. My boots were quiet on the rug. The case was unlocked. Empty. The plaque was still there. The outline in the velvet showed exactly where the silver star had rested for decades. My chest tightened, not like panic, more like pressure. Controlled, focused. The same feeling right before a breach. I checked the drawer below. Nothing. I checked the shelf. Nothing. No note. No explanation, just absence. For a second I stood there and listened to the muffled party sounds bleeding through the walls. Laughter, ice clinking, someone bragging about a yacht. Then I walked back into the dining room. Cassidy saw my face change before I said anything. Her smile sharpened. Something wrong, she asked. You look tense. That PTSD thing acting up again? A couple of heads turned, not enough to stop eating. I stopped beside her chair, close enough to see the pores under her makeup, close enough that she couldn't pretend I wasn't there. Where is Dad's silver star, I asked. She blinked once, slow, then she laughed. Oh my God. That thing, she waved a hand. Relax, it's just a medal. The word just landed wrong. It doesn't belong to you, I said. My voice stayed level. That seemed to bother her more than yelling would have. Cassidy leaned back, crossing her legs. She raised her wrist again, casual. The watch caught the chandelier and threw light across the table. I needed liquidity, she said. And honestly, it was just sitting there, collecting dust. I found someone who actually values history. My mother frowned. Cassidy, maybe not during dinner. It's fine, Cassidy said. She's always been dramatic about Dad, like he was hers alone. I looked at Gordon. He still hadn't said a word. You sold a military decoration, I said, a silver star, and Cassidy shrugged. Dad always wanted me to shine. This helps my brand, which helps the family. You wouldn't understand. You chose that. She nodded at my uniform like it was a bad tattoo. I scanned the room. Expensive suits, perfect teeth. People who'd never been cold on purpose. They watched us the way people watch reality TV, quietly picking sides without admitting it. Let me ask you something and be honest with yourself while you listen to this. Have you ever walked into a room knowing you were the most disciplined, most capable person there, and still been treated like hired help because you didn't fit their idea of success? Gordon finally spoke. Leah, enough. You're making people uncomfortable. Elena nodded quickly. We don't need an outburst. Cassidy has a big future ahead of her. Julian's family is very particular. Julian Reed sat 2 seats down, smiling politely, eyes calculating. He hadn't said a word, but his posture said he was already deciding how much of this would be useful later. So that's it, I said. You're all fine with this. Cassidy tapped the face of her watch. It's done. Try to let it go. I held her gaze for a second longer than was comfortable. She shifted first. I picked up my bag. The room seemed to exhale relieved. Kitchen's through there, Elena said again, pointing as if she was being generous. I didn't go to the kitchen. I walked out the front door instead. The night air was cooler. Honest. I stood on the steps and let the noise from inside fade. Somewhere behind me a door closed. Somewhere ahead of me a line had just been crossed. I adjusted the strap on my duffel and started down the drive, already making a list in my head, not emotional, not angry, just precise. I slowed my steps near the end of the driveway, turned back once, and walked straight through the front door again before the valet could decide whether to stop me. Inside, the noise hadn't changed. It never does when people think the mess has already been handled. Cassidy was still at the table mid-conversation holding court. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Chairs shifted as I approached. People sensed friction the way animals do. You sold it to who, I asked. She sighed like I was ruining a photo shoot. A private collector. Clean transaction, very discreet. How much? She smiled and finally stood lifting her wrist higher than before. 95,000, give or take, worth it. Up close, the watch was worse. Diamonds everywhere screaming for attention. The kind of thing you buy when you want strangers to know you've arrived, even if you have no idea where you're standing. You traded a combat decoration for a watch, I said. Do you hear yourself? Cassidy tilted her head. You're being emotional. That word, emotional. It's what people use when they want to end a conversation without admitting they're wrong. My mother reached for her wine. Leah, please. You've been through a lot. Maybe this isn't the time for what I asked, for pretending that didn't belong to him. Gordon finally set his fork down. Your sister made a business decision. I looked at him. Really looked. The man who used to check my boots before school now couldn't meet my eyes. That medal was awarded for valor, I said. It's not inventory. Cassidy laughed again, louder this time. You talk like it was magic. It's a piece of metal. Dad isn't even here to care. The room went quiet. Not shocked quiet. Uncomfortable quiet. The kind where everyone waits to see if someone else will step in. Julian finally did. Leah, he said smoothly. I think what Cassidy's saying is that symbols mean different things to different people. His smile was practiced. His cufflinks caught the light just right. He had the posture of a man who'd never been told no in a meaningful way. Funny, I said, because in my line of work, symbols are exactly what get people killed. Cassidy rolled her eyes. Here we go. You know what Dad told me after his last deployment? I asked her. He said the medal wasn't about him. It was about the people who didn't come back. He kept it because it reminded him to stay humble. Cassidy tapped the watch face. And now it's helping me build something. A future. Dad always said I was meant for more. That's not what he meant, I said. Gordon's voice hardened. Enough. You don't get to decide that. Elena nodded quickly like agreement was a reflex. Cassidy has responsibilities. Appearances matter, especially now. She glanced at Julian. Cassidy caught it and smiled. Exactly. Julian's family doesn't need complications. Complications like honor, I asked. Like instability, Cassidy shot back. You disappear for years, come home angry, and expect everyone to rearrange their lives. I felt the shift then. Not in me, in them. The moment they chose the easier story. Elena set her glass down carefully. Leah, we've all worried about you. The things you've seen, it changes people. There it was. Gordon cleared his throat. Your reactions haven't always been proportional. Cassidy leaned in. You've been different since your last deployment. Paranoid, obsessive. Dad's office, the medal. Maybe you're fixating. Julian nodded once. Slow, supportive. We just want to make sure you're okay. I looked around the table. Faces that knew nothing about my work, my evaluations, my clearance. Faces that had decided my experiences were a liability because they were inconvenient. PTSD isn't a punchline, I said. No one said it was. Cassidy replied. But it does explain a lot. The way she said it told me this wasn't spontaneous. This had been rehearsed, framed, polished. So let me get this straight, I said. You sell a military decoration, you flash the proceeds at dinner, and when I object, I'm unstable. Gordon stood. You're upsetting everyone. Go cool off, Julian added. We can talk later when things aren't so heated. Later. The favorite word of people who never plan to revisit the truth. Cassidy lifted her wrist again, smiling for someone's phone camera. Try to be happy for me, Leah. This watch is an investment. I leaned closer so only she could hear me. You don't know what you sold. Her smile didn't falter. You don't know how the world works. I straightened and stepped back. No shouting, no dramatic exit. Just silence from me and relief from them. As I turned away, I caught my reflection in the glass cabinet behind the table. Old uniform, tired eyes, still standing. The party resumed before I reached the door. Someone laughed too loudly. Music turned up half a notch. Outside, the night felt steadier than the room I'd left. I took out my phone not to call anyone, not yet. I looked back through the window once more. Cassidy was already posing again, wrist angled just right, the watch doing its job. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and walked toward my car. My thoughts narrowing, precise, stripped of anything they could later call emotional. I unlocked my car, tossed the bag into the back, and sat there with the engine off until the house lights stopped feeling personal. Then I drove to the smallest apartment. I still paid for the one with thin walls and neighbors who minded their own business, because everyone had something to hide. I showered, fast changed, and set my phone on the table. No calls, no messages. Good. Silence meant no one was trying to manage me yet. I pulled my laptop from the bag and powered it up. The screen glow was steady, familiar. I didn't need coffee. I needed clarity. Dad had been careful, obsessive even, not paranoid, prepared. When he retired, he told me he'd cataloged everything that mattered. He said history doesn't protect itself. People do. That line stuck. The silver star wasn't just a medal. It had provenance, chain of custody, documentation most families never think about. Dad did. He'd helped advise on historical artifact recovery for years, quietly, no plaques, no dinners. I logged into a secure portal I hadn't touched since my last deployment. Credentials still valid, clearance still green. I didn't smile, I just worked. Military-issued RFID tags aren't GPS beacons. They don't chirp or glow. They sit there passive, waiting to be scanned by the right systems. Dad had one embedded in the backing of the display mount years ago, registered as part of a protected artifact set. If the metal moved through any legitimate channel, auction house, insurer, bonded courier, it would leave a shadow. I ran the query. Nothing yet. That told me two things. Cassidy hadn't sold it through a reputable dealer, and the buyer didn't want paperwork. I switched windows and pulled up a different folder. House schematics. Old but accurate. Dad and I had installed the cameras ourselves after a series of break-ins in the neighborhood. Not obvious ones. Pinholes in vents. Motion sensors calibrated to ignore pets and catch hands. He'd trusted me to wire them because he knew I wouldn't talk about it. I accessed the local server remotely. The system was dormant now, but the footage was still there, time-stamped and backed up. Months of quiet rooms and nothing happening, until one night. Cassidy entered Dad's office after midnight, heels off, hair pulled back. She didn't look nervous. She looked efficient. She went straight to the display case, unlocked it with the key that had hung on Gordon's ring for decades, and lifted the silver star out like she was removing a book from a shelf. She didn't pause. She didn't hesitate. Julian stepped into frame a moment later, already on his phone. He didn't touch the metal. He didn't need to. He pointed, directed, managed. They talked without sound, but I didn't need it. I'd sat through enough briefings to read body language. Cassidy held it up. Julian shook his head once. She adjusted her grip. He nodded. They left together. I clipped the footage, encrypted it, and stored it offline. Evidence likes patience. Then I noticed something else. A second clip from a different angle 2 days later. Same office. Different conversation. Julian at the desk this time, laptop open. Cassidy leaning over his shoulder. Papers spread out, not contracts, Schematics. Dad's handwriting. My jaw set. I zoomed in. Technical drawings. Old but not obsolete. My father's work on signal interference mitigation. Defensive. Meant to protect, not exploit. The kind of thing that gets attention if it crosses the wrong desk. Julian tapped the screen, animated now. Cassidy nodded, distracted, scrolling her phone. She didn't understand what she was looking at. She didn't need to. Julian did. I pulled metadata from the clip. Cross-referenced dates. The next morning, Julian had emailed a redacted packet to a shell address registered offshore. Amateur mistake. Confident people get sloppy. I leaned back and let the chair creak. Not anger, alignment. The picture was coming into focus. Cassidy hadn't just sold a medal, she'd handed access to someone who knew exactly what to do with it. Julian wasn't marrying into the family, he was acquiring it. I checked the RFID query again, still nothing. That meant the medal was either sitting in a private safe or in transit without a paper trail. Both narrowed my options. I shut the laptop and stood. My apartment felt smaller now, not unsafe, just insufficient. I packed light, laptop, external drive, phone, no weapon. This wasn't that kind of problem. On the drive, I passed the river and didn't look at it. I focused on lists, places Julian did business, people he trusted, patterns he thought were invisible. By the time I parked, I had 3 likely storage facilities and 2 private vault services flagged. I didn't need to break into anything. I needed confirmation. I walked into a coffee shop near Julian's office, ordered something I wouldn't drink, and sat where I could see the door. He arrived on schedule, punctual, predictable. He took a call, pacing slightly back-turned. I caught fragments. Yes, secured. No, not yet. Waiting on transfer. Waiting on transfer. I left before he finished. Information loses value if you linger. Back in the car, my phone buzzed. A message from my mother. Can we talk? We're worried about you. I didn't reply. Instead, I sent one message of my own to a contact who owed me a favor, not a friend, a professional. I need a discreet confirmation scan. Artifact level, no names. The reply came quick. Send the registry. I forwarded Dad's old documentation, the kind that never expires. I sat there with the engine idling, watching pedestrians cross like nothing significant had just shifted under their feet. The city didn't know, it never does. Another message came in. Ping registered. Static location. Private vault service. Midtown. I put the phone down and stared ahead, letting the traffic light cycle twice before it turned green. I didn't move right away. Movement wasn't the point. Verification was. I drove toward the address, not to go inside, just to see it. Clean facade, discreet signage, the kind of place that sells silence. My phone buzzed again, this time with a calendar invite I hadn't accepted. Cassidy's engagement party details, Grand Heritage Hotel, full guest list, dress code. I declined it. Then I saved the date. I pulled away from the curb, merged into traffic, and adjusted the rearview mirror until my face was centered, steady, and exactly where it needed to be. I was halfway through reviewing the Vault Service's public compliance filings when someone knocked on my door like they owned the hallway. 3 sharp hits, confident, legal. I checked the peephole. Middle-aged man, tailored suit, leather briefcase held just low enough to signal seriousness. I didn't recognize him, which meant he wasn't sloppy. I opened the door halfway. Leah Vance, he said, already nodding. Silas Vance, family counsel, of course he was. I didn't call a lawyer, I said. No, he replied, pleasant as a pharmacist. Your family did. I stepped aside and let him in. Control doesn't come from blocking doors. It comes from knowing what walks through them. He sat without being asked, placed the briefcase on my table and clicked it open. Papers neatly stacked. Tabs color-coded. Theatrical restraint. Your parents are concerned, he began. Recent behavior, emotional volatility, fixation on personal effects. Are we using medical words now, I asked. He smiled thinly. Legal ones. He slid a document toward me. Title bolded. Voluntary renunciation of inheritance rights. I didn't touch it. This would simplify things, Silas said. Given your service record and the stress you've endured, it's in everyone's best interest. Everyone meaning Cassidy, I said. Everyone meaning the family, he corrected, including you. I leaned back. You broke the seal on a will you don't administer. That's interesting. He didn't blink. We're prepared to escalate if necessary. There it was, The threat without teeth showing. Escalate how I asked. Silas folded his hands. Petition for a competency review. Temporary conservatorship. Treatment placement. Treatment for what impaired judgment, he said calmly. PTSD is well documented. And you've made statements that could be construed as paranoid. I nodded. Like accusing my sister of selling a military decoration. Exactly. He slid another paper forward. Psychological assessment. Pre-filled. Not signed. Yet. This is forged, I said. It's provisional, he replied. Pending cooperation. I finally reached out and took the document, scanning it quickly. The language was careful. Vague. Enough to stick if thrown. You want me declared incompetent, I said, so you can lock me up and clean out the estate. Silas sighed like I was missing the point on purpose. We want to protect you from yourself. I reached into my pocket and set my phone on the table, screen down. You're recording this, he asked. I'm allowed to record conversations I'm part of, I said. South Carolina is one-party consent. He hesitated. Just long enough. That won't help you, he said. It already has. Silas leaned forward. Commander Vance, let me be blunt. You can sign this, walk away with dignity, and focus on your recovery, or we can proceed and things will get restrictive. Restrictive like a locked facility, structured, he said. Where I can't access counsel, temporary. Where I can't contest asset transfers, procedural. I smiled. Not wide, controlled. You know what you forgot, I asked. What's that? You assumed I'd be alone. He glanced at the door, then back at me. You are. I picked up my phone and tapped the screen so it lit. The recording timer was running. Clear audio levels, his voice, my questions. You just outlined intent, I said. Fraud, coercion, abusive process. Silas closed the briefcase slowly. You don't have the leverage you think you do. I leaned forward now. You came to my residence. You presented falsified medical documentation. You threatened involuntary commitment to obtain property rights. That's not leverage. That's a confession. He stood. This conversation never happened. It did, I said. And you just signed it with your voice. Silas's smile disappeared. He straightened his tie. Be careful, Commander. You're treading into territory you don't understand. I stood as well. I've operated in places where the rules mattered more because no one was watching. You're sloppy because you think this is domestic. He hesitated again. Longer this time. We'll be in touch, he said. Don't, I replied. He left without another word. I locked the door and didn't move for a full minute. Then I exhaled once slow and sat down. I duplicated the audio file, encrypted it, uploaded a copy to a secure vault not tied to my name. Evidence likes redundancy. My phone buzzed. A message from Cassidy. You're making things difficult. Please stop. I didn't respond. Another message followed this one from my father. We're doing this for your own good. I archived it. I pulled up the Vault Service's internal policies. Conservatorship triggers, emergency holds. I cross-referenced timelines. They were moving faster than they should have been able to, which meant Julian was leaning on people with influence. I opened a new file and labeled it clean. Trap analysis. They wanted me quiet. Isolated. Papered into irrelevance. That only works if the target reacts emotionally. I didn't. I checked the calendar again. Engagement party details. Guest list included donors, board members, a state senator, a few names I recognized from briefings long ago. I closed the laptop and stood. My apartment was still small, still adequate. I picked up my phone and typed one line into a secure channel. Proceed to contingency documentation. Preserve chain. The reply came back a moment later. Acknowledged. I set the phone down, poured a glass of water, and drank it standing up. Eyes on the door. Posture relaxed but ready, like I'd been trained to live. The city hummed outside, indifferent. Inside, the plan adjusted itself piece by piece, without drama, without rush, exactly the way it was supposed to. I zipped the dress bag closed and left the apartment without checking the mirror again. The dress didn't need reassurance. Neither did I. The Grand Heritage Hotel rose out of downtown Charleston like it had something to prove. Valets in pressed uniforms. Guests stepping out of black cars, already smiling before their feet touched the pavement. I handed my keys to a kid who looked barely old enough to rent the car, and walked inside before anyone could ask who I was supposed to be. The lobby smelled like money and flowers trying too hard. Cassidy's engagement photos were everywhere, Soft lighting, careful angles. Julian's hand always placed just right on her back like a brand endorsement. I crossed the floor at a steady pace. Not rushed, not hesitant. Heads turned, not because I was loud, because I didn't belong to the pattern. Cassidy spotted me from across the room. I saw the exact moment her jaw tightened before the smile came back. She excused herself from a cluster of women in identical dresses and intercepted me near the bar. "What are you doing here?" she asked. Teeth clenched behind a grin. "Drinking the free champagne," I said. "It's decent, you're not on the list." "I know," she leaned closer. "You need to leave." I glanced around. "This is a hotel, not a bunker." Julian appeared at her side, already wearing concern like a tailored jacket. "Leah," he said, "this really isn't appropriate." "That's interesting," I replied. I was thinking the same thing. Cassidy reached for my arm. I stepped half an inch out of range. Not enough to make a scene, enough to make a point. "Dad's here," she hissed. "Mom's already stressed." I nodded toward the far end of the room. Gordon and Elena stood near the stage, surrounded by people who mattered to them. Gordon's posture was stiff. Elena's smile was on autopilot. "Relax," I said. "I'm not here to embarrass anyone." Julian studied me. He always did that when things didn't follow the script. "Then why are you here?" I took a sip from my glass. "Because you invited half the city." It felt rude not to come. Cassidy opened her mouth to respond, then froze. Someone behind her had stood up. A man in his 60s, silver hair, posture straight in a way that didn't come from golf. Conversations around him quieted as people recognized him. He walked past Cassidy without a glance and stopped in front of me. "Commander Vance," he said, extending his hand. I shook it. Firm, brief, "Senator." He smiled. "Good to see you stateside." The room went still in a way that couldn't be faked. Cassidy turned slowly. "You know each other?" The senator looked at her like she'd asked whether water was wet. "I had the privilege of working with her father, and later with her." Julian's smile faltered. "Just a fraction. I didn't realize," Cassidy said. "That's a common problem," I said. The senator nodded toward the stage. "Mind if I borrow your microphone for a moment?" Cassidy blinked. "This is our engagement. It'll only take a second," he said. "Not a request." He stepped up onto the stage with the ease of someone who'd done it 1,000 times. A hotel staffer rushed over and handed him the mic without asking for credentials. The hum of conversation dropped to silence. "I won't interrupt your celebration for long," the senator said. But when I saw Commander Vance on the guest list, I wanted to publicly acknowledge her service. Some people in this room owe their safety to individuals who never make headlines. He looked directly at me. "Welcome home." Polite applause followed, some confused, some enthusiastic. Cassidy stood frozen, her smile finally gone. The senator handed the mic back and stepped down. As he passed me, he added quietly, "You have friends here." "I know," I said. Cassidy recovered fast. She always did. "Well," she said brightly, "since everyone's paying attention, let's get back to celebrating." I set my empty glass on a tray and stepped forward before she could redirect the room. "Actually," I said, "I brought something." Cassidy's eyes narrowed. "This isn't funny. I didn't say it was." I pulled a small remote from my clutch and nodded toward the projector already mounted above the stage. Standard hotel setup. Plug and play. I'd tested it earlier. Julian took a step toward me. "Leah, don't." I met his eyes. "You should probably sit down." The screen behind the stage flickered to life. At first it was just time-stamped footage, grainy security camera angles, Cassidy's office at home, then Dad's study, then the vault service hallway. Whispers rippled through the room. Cassidy turned pale. "Turn that off." I didn't move. The video shifted to a clear shot of Cassidy holding the silver star, turning it over in her hands. Julian's voice came through the speakers, this time crisp and unmistakable. "No paperwork," he said. "Collector only. Offshore transfer." Someone gasped. Not dramatically, just enough. Julian stepped back, shaking his head. "This is manipulated." The video continued. Julian again, later pointing at schematics. "This part's valuable. Defense applications." The word defense landed hard. Cassidy spun on him. "You said it was just memorabilia." Julian's face hardened. "This isn't the time." The room erupted. Phones came out. Murmurs turned sharp. Gordon pushed through the crowd toward the stage. "Shut it down," he barked. Elena followed, her hands trembling. "Leah, please." I didn't look at them. I watched Julian. He straightened his jacket, eyes scanning exits. Then he laughed lightly, the sound thin. This is absurd, he said. Cassidy acted alone. I had no idea what she was doing. Cassidy stared at him. What, you made the call, he said smoothly. You wanted the watch. You said it was yours to sell. The room felt colder. Cassidy's voice cracked. You promised, Julian raised his hands. I was trying to protect you. That was when the weight shifted, when people stopped seeing a power couple and started seeing a liability. I stepped closer to the stage. Funny thing about promises, I said. They're easy to make when you think no one's recording. Julian glared at me. You think you've won something, I think you've told the truth, I replied. Just not the way you planned. Security moved closer, unsure who they were supposed to escort. Gordon reached for my arm. I didn't pull away this time. You've gone too far, he said. I met his eyes. You helped. The projector hummed softly behind us, looping quietly indifferent to the panic spreading through the room. I didn't touch the remote. I didn't need to. The damage was already moving on its own. Julian stepped away from Cassidy, creating just enough space to look reasonable. He squared his shoulders and addressed the room like a man delivering quarterly results. Let's slow this down, he said. There's a misunderstanding here. Cassidy grabbed his sleeve. You told me this was legal. He shook her off gently, the way you handle something fragile you no longer want associated with you. I told you to consult counsel. You chose not to. Her mouth opened, closed. She looked around for backup and found none. Phones were up now. No one was pretending not to record. I didn't even know what the medal was worth, she said. You handled everything. Julian exhaled, patient. Cassidy, you insisted. You wanted liquidity. You wanted the watch. I advised caution. I stepped closer to the stage so my voice would carry without effort. That's not what the footage shows. Julian glanced at the screen, then back to the crowd. Anyone can splice video. Sure, I said. So let's talk metadata. I nodded once to the technician near the booth. He looked at the senator, who nodded back. The screen shifted to a file directory. Timestamps, hash values, chain of custody logs. Original files, I said. Pulled from a local system installed by my father. Verified by an independent analyst. Cross-checked with access logs from your own devices. Julian's jaw tightened. I continued calm, factual. You didn't just discuss selling the Silver Star. You discussed its contents. You discussed leveraging my father's work. You named a buyer flagged under export controls. A low murmur rolled through the room. Someone whispered the word treason, not loudly but enough. Julian laughed once sharp. This is ridiculous. I work in venture capital, you work in arbitrage, I said, and you misjudged the risk. Cassidy stared at him. You said Dad wanted this. Julian didn't look at her. Your father is dead. The sentence landed wrong. People flinched. Gordon surged forward again. Get him off the stage. Security hesitated. This wasn't a drunk uncle. This was a liability with witnesses. Julian raised his hands. I am being set up by a disgruntled sibling with a history of instability. I turned my head slightly, just enough to acknowledge the accusation without accepting it. You filed a draft petition for my involuntary commitment 48 hours ago. Julian froze. That's a lie, he said quickly. I tapped the remote once. A document appeared on screen. Header visible. Julian's firm logo. Silas Vance listed as counsel. Julian Reed copied on the thread. The room went quiet again, but this time it wasn't discomfort. It was recognition. Cassidy looked at the screen, then at Julian, then at her parents. You were going to lock her up. Elena covered her mouth. Gordon looked like the floor had dropped out from under him. Julian recovered fast. It was a precaution. Leah is volatile. I nodded. That's what you told them. You said I was a risk to myself, to others. Julian leaned forward, voice lowering. You are. I met his stare. You sold access to restricted material. I didn't sell anything, he snapped. She did. Cassidy recoiled. You said we were a team. Julian straightened, choosing a new audience. Ladies and gentlemen, I had no control over Cassidy's actions. I tried to protect the family from a scandal. I let him finish. Interrupting weakens a lie. Evidence ends it. The transfer request came from your account, I said. Your IP, your credentials. You asked for payment in a crypto mix, routed through 3 shells. Amateur move. Julian's face flushed. You don't know what you're talking about. I stepped aside so the senator could be seen again. He hadn't moved. He hadn't needed to. Julian, the senator said evenly, You've been advised to stop speaking. Julian swallowed. On whose authority mine will do for now, the senator replied. Federal agents are en route. Cassidy's knees buckled slightly. She reached for the edge of the stage. Dad, she whispered. Gordon looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. Not as a star. Not as a project. As a consequence. Elena shook her head slowly. This can't be happening. It is, I said. And it didn't start tonight. Julian backed toward the side exit. Security moved with him now, instinctively forming a barrier that looked more like containment than protection. You think you've won? Julian said, his voice tight. This ruins all of you. I think you ruined yourself, I replied. You just needed an audience. He laughed again, brittle. You're nothing without the uniform. I'm still standing without it, I said. Cassidy slid down onto a chair, hands shaking. Her watch caught the light one more time, bright and obscene. I looked at it, then back at her. You didn't ask what he wanted, you just liked what he promised. She didn't answer. Phones buzzed across the room as messages went out. People stepping away, creating distance, recalculating their proximity to the fallout. Gordon turned to me, his voice low. You could have handled this privately. I met his eyes. You didn't want it handled. You wanted it quiet. Elena reached for my arm. I let her this time. Her grip was light, uncertain. We were afraid, she said. Of me, I replied. She didn't deny it. The screen behind us continued to scroll through logs and confirmations, dry and undeniable. No commentary, no drama, just facts stacking up. Julian stopped struggling when the first uniformed officers entered the room. Not police. Different posture, different bearing. Cassidy looked up at them, eyes wide. They're not here for me, are they? I didn't answer. Answers weren't mine to give anymore. The senator stepped closer to me and spoke quietly. You did exactly what you should have. I nodded. I documented. He glanced at the officers, then back at me. Sometimes that's enough. Around us, the party had dissolved into clusters of whispered conversations and stunned silence. The masks were off now, dropped where they stood. I stayed where I was, hands relaxed at my sides, breathing steady, watching the room adjust to a reality it couldn't curate or spin its way out of. Gordon found his voice again once the uniform started drawing attention away from him. He stepped in close, lowering his tone like authority still worked on me. You're not getting a dime, he said. I'll see to it personally. I looked at him, really looked, and noticed how small the threat sounded, now that it had nowhere to land. That decision stopped being yours a while ago. He scoffed. You think some spectacle changes the will? I think facts do, I said. Elena hovered just behind him, eyes darting between the officers and Cassidy, who sat frozen, hands clenched together like she could hold the room still if she squeezed hard enough. You don't understand what you're risking, Gordon said. This family isn't a shield I cut in. It never was. He opened his mouth to argue again, then stopped when his phone buzzed. He checked it, frowned, and slipped it back into his pocket without replying. Control slipping feels physical. I could see it in the way his shoulders tightened. Julian was being escorted toward a side corridor, now flanked by men who didn't need to announce themselves. He tried to keep his chin up, but his eyes were searching, calculating, looking for leverage that wasn't there. Cassidy finally stood, voice sharp and brittle. You can't let them take him. No one answered her. She turned on me instead. Do something. You caused this. I met her gaze. I documented it. Gordon snapped. You called them. I didn't deny it. Denial invites argument. I followed protocol, I said. What protocol? He demanded. I reached into my clutch and took out my phone. The room was loud again, people whispering, staff pretending to be busy. But the space around us felt clear, like a perimeter had been set. I unlocked the screen and brought up a secure dialer. No contact name, just a string of numbers most people would never see twice. Gordon laughed once. You're bluffing. I raised the phone and made the call. It rang once. Then a voice answered. Calm, familiar, go, Protocol 7, I said. Objective confirmed. Compromise identified. There was no pause. Location Grand Heritage Hotel, Charleston. Asset protected artifact. Silver star. Secondary exposure includes restricted technical material. Status static. Private vault service. Midtown. Buyer attempted unauthorized transfer. Authority, I looked at Gordon as I spoke. Hostile domestic facilitation. Understood, the voice said. Initiate recovery. I ended the call and slipped the phone back into my clutch. Gordon stared at me. What did you just do? I didn't answer him. I watched the officers reposition subtly. Hands near radios, now eyes shifting toward entrances and windows. The atmosphere changed. Not panic, purpose. Cassidy shook her head. You don't get to do this. You don't outrank everyone. I almost smiled. I don't have to. The first sound came faintly distant enough that only people who'd heard it before recognized it. A low, steady thrum, more felt than heard. Conversation slowed, heads tilted. What is that? Someone asked. The thrum grew, vibrating the glassware on nearby tables. Chandeliers trembled just enough to draw attention upward. A hotel manager hurried toward security, whispering urgently. One of the officers lifted a hand, stopping him without touching him. The sound resolved into something unmistakable. Rotors, heavy ones. Cassidy's eyes widened. This is insane. Gordon's face drained of color. You called the military. I called for a recovery, I said. There's a difference. The windows along the ballroom wall brightened, suddenly washed in moving light. Shadows swept across the ceiling in broad arcs. Phones went up again, this time, not out of curiosity but reflex. The senator stepped closer to Gordon, voice low but carrying. You should stand down. Gordon laughed weakly. This is a misunderstanding. The light intensified, focus now pinning the stage in white. Outside, the rotors thundered closer, precise, controlled, no circling. They knew exactly where they were going. Cassidy covered her ears. Make it stop. Elena sank into a chair, hands shaking. The doors at the far end of the ballroom rattled, then held. The noise outside stabilized, holding position like a held breath. I checked my watch. Not the time. The alignment. Gordon grabbed my arm again, harder this time. You think this makes you powerful? I removed his hand gently but firmly. It makes me accountable. The first announcement came over the hotel's internal system voice, strained but professional. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm and follow instructions from security personnel. No one moved. They were all watching the doors. Julian reappeared briefly at the edge of the room, flanked now by different uniforms. He saw the lights, the posture, the way no one was arguing anymore. His confidence collapsed in real time. You did this, he hissed at me. I nodded once. You did the rest. The doors shook again, then burst inward under a controlled strike. Not splintering, not chaotic, clean. The smell hit first, not smoke, discipline, cold air rushing in with the sound of boots hitting marble in perfect rhythm. They came in fast, 12 of them, fanning out with practiced efficiency. Weapons low but ready, eyes scanning, no wasted motion, no shouting. The room fell silent in a way I'd never heard outside a briefing room. People pressed back instinctively, creating space they didn't understand, but obeyed anyway. The team leader stepped forward, helmet on, visor up. He scanned the room once, then locked eyes with me. He stopped exactly 3 feet away, heels together, spine straight, and snapped a salute so sharp it cut through the air. Welcome home, ma'am, he said. The stolen silver star has been located. Target secured. The sound of that sentence landed heavier than the rotors outside. Cassidy collapsed back into her chair. Gordon didn't move at all. I returned the salute without thinking, muscle memory flawless. Then let my hand fall. Proceed, I said. The team moved past me, splitting cleanly, already coordinating with the officers on scene. No confusion, no debate, just execution. I stood there, centered in the light pouring through the shattered doorway, breathing steady, watching the room finally understand that some lines once crossed don't belong to families anymore. I stepped aside as the team flowed past me. Their movement so clean it barely disturbed the air. Boots found positions, angles locked in. A perimeter formed without a single word wasted. Lieutenant Commander Miller gave a short hand signal. 2 operators peeled off toward the service corridor. Another pair coordinated with the uniformed officers already on site. Radios murmured, clipped and precise. The room stayed frozen. Wealth does that when it meets authority that doesn't care. Everyone remain where you are, Miller said, calm and audible without being loud. This is a federal recovery operation. Cassidy's voice cut through the stillness. You can't just take people. Miller didn't look at her. Ma'am, step back. Julian tried to straighten himself like posture might save him. This is a civil matter. Miller finally turned. Sir, put your hands where I can see them. Julian hesitated. Long enough to make it worse. An operator moved half a step closer. Julian complied. Gordon found his voice again, thin and brittle. This is outrageous. Do you know who I am? Yes, Miller said. Please sit down. That was it. No titles. No negotiation. Military police entered next, uniforms. Distinct presence, unmistakable. They moved with purpose, not aggression, cuffs already in hand. Cassidy stood abruptly. Wait, I didn't know what he was doing. One of the MPs addressed her gently but firmly. Ma'am, we need you to come with us. She shook her head, eyes darting to our parents. Dad Gordon stared straight ahead, jaw locked. Elena had sunk fully into her chair, now hands folded like prayer without belief. Julian tried one last angle. This is a mistake. I have counsel. You can call them, the MP said, securing the cuffs. Later, Julian's eyes found mine again. You didn't have to do this. I didn't, I said. You did. They guided him away first. Cassidy followed her heels, clicking too loud against the marble until an MP steadied her arm. The watch flashed once more under the lights as she passed me. Then it was gone. The team leader approached again. Vault team is en route. Artifact recovery. ETA 10 minutes. Copy, I said. He nodded once and moved on, already managing the next layer. The senator approached me, voice low. This room will be cleared shortly. Statements will be taken. I'll cooperate, I said. I know, he paused. Your father would be proud. I didn't answer. Pride wasn't the point. Hotel staff hovered at the edges, unsure where hospitality ended and reality began. Guests whispered into phones, the story already mutating as it spread. Gordon finally turned to me. You destroyed this family. I met his eyes. Number one, I stopped pretending. Elena stood unsteadily. Leah, please. They'll take everything. They'll take what isn't yours to keep, I said. She reached out, then stopped herself as if realizing touch no longer granted access. An MP approached Gordon and Elena next. Sir, ma'am, we need to ask you a few questions. Gordon bristled. Am I under arrest? At this moment, no. The pause mattered. They complied. The ballroom emptied in stages. Guests filtered out under supervision, murmuring, recording, recalculating their social calendars. The chandeliers still sparkled, unaware they'd just watched something irreversible. Outside, the rotors wound down, slightly maintaining position. The light softened but didn't leave. Miller returned. Ma'am, Vault team has visual on the artifact. Condition, I asked. Intact. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Minutes later, 2 operators re-entered carrying a sealed evidence case, transparent front. Inside, the silver star rested exactly as it should have been, dull and unassuming, heavier than it looked. They stopped in front of me. Miller opened the case just enough to present it. Recovered and verified. I reached in and lifted it carefully. The weight was familiar, honest. For a moment, the room fell away. No cameras, no parents, just the object and what it represented. I closed the case and handed it back. Secure transport. Yes, ma'am. As they turned, a small voice spoke up. Aunt Leah. I turned to see Toby. My nephew standing near the edge of the cleared floor, eyes wide, confusion battling curiosity. He'd slipped through the chaos unnoticed. I knelt to his level and opened the case again just enough. This belonged to your grandfather, I said. He earned it helping people who couldn't help themselves. Toby reached out but stopped short, waiting for permission. I nodded. He touched the edge reverently. It's not shiny, he said. No, I replied. That's how you know it matters. I closed the case and stood. The team took it from there, moving toward the exit with purpose intact. Gordon watched from across the room, his face unreadable now, something hollow settling in. Elena's eyes followed Toby back to his seat, then to me. You didn't have to involve him. He's already involved, I said. You just didn't notice. The last of the guests were escorted out. The ballroom echoed, now too big for the people left in it. Miller approached one final time. Ma'am, transport is ready. Good, I said. He hesitated, then extended his hand. Not formal this time. Human. Good to have you back, he said. I shook it. Good to be back. The door swung open again, letting in the night air. The rotors lifted, light shifting as the aircraft prepared to depart. I watched until the team disappeared into the noise and motion, the silver star leaving with them exactly where it belonged. Behind me, the hotel staff began the slow work of pretending this had been just another event. I stood alone in the center of the room, hands relaxed, posture, easy breathing, steady as the echoes faded and the consequences continued moving forward without me needing to push them anymore. The ballroom emptied faster than I expected. When authority leaves a room, it takes gravity with it. What stayed behind was quiet and the smell of expensive flowers that no longer meant anything. I walked out through a side exit and into the night, the air cooler now. honest again. The rotors were gone. The streetlights had stopped flickering. Charleston went back to pretending this was just another evening. I didn't go home right away. I drove until the roads thinned and parked near the water engine running radio off. I sat there long enough for my pulse to settle into its normal rhythm. No rush, no spike, just baseline. My phone buzzed once, artifact secured, chain intact. I typed back 2 words. Thank you, that was it. No speeches, no closure package. In my world, the work ends when the objective is safe. The next morning came with lawyers and statements and paperwork, thick enough to remind you that consequences are heavy. Because they're real. Cassidy and Julian were charged separately. Different cases. Different paths. Same destination. The words on the documents were clinical export violations, fraud conspiracy, but the tone was unmistakable. This wasn't going away. Gordon and Elena weren't arrested that day. They lost something quieter. Invitations, board seats, the polite smiles that used to open doors. In Charleston, reputation doesn't explode, it leaks. I met them once more briefly in a conference room that smelled like carpet cleaner and regret. Gordon tried to speak first. We didn't think it would go this far, he said. That was the problem, I replied. Elena cried. Not loudly, efficiently. We were trying to protect the family. You protected an image, I said. Families don't survive on that. They asked if we could talk later. I didn't say no. I didn't say yes. Some questions don't deserve immediate answers. The Silver Star came back to me 2 days later, hand-delivered, documented, signed for. I held it in both hands and felt the same weight I'd felt as a teenager the first time Dad let me touch it. Not heavy because it was metal. Heavy because it was earned. I didn't put it back in the old display case. I took it to a small ceremony instead. No press, no speeches, just a quiet room at the base and a handful of people who knew what it meant. When it was over, I carried it home and placed it in a simple box on a shelf that didn't draw attention to itself. Toby came by that weekend. He was quieter than usual. Eyes tracking things adults think kids don't notice. Are you mad at my mom? He asked. I considered the question carefully. I'm disappointed, I said. Those aren't the same. He nodded, absorbing that. Is Grandpa in trouble? He made choices, I said. So did your mom. Did you? I smiled a little. Every day. He climbed onto the couch beside me and watched me polish the metal, gently, slow, and methodical. Why didn't you sell it? He asked. Because it isn't mine to profit from, I said. It's mine to protect. He thought about that, then nodded like he'd filed it away for later use. When he left, the apartment felt right-sized again. Quiet but not empty. I went back to work soon after. Different assignments, same standards. The uniform fit the same. The world hadn't changed. Just a small corner of it had been corrected. I didn't hear from Cassidy directly. Her attorneys did all the talking now. They were very careful with their words. That told me everything. Julian tried once through an intermediary to float a settlement. I declined without comment. Some things aren't negotiable. Gordon sent an email a month later, short, stiff. He said he hoped I was well. He said he'd made mistakes. He didn't ask forgiveness. He asked for distance. I gave it to him. Elena sent a handwritten note. She apologized without conditions. She didn't ask me to come home. She just said she missed the person she thought I was before she stopped listening. I folded the note and put it away. Healing doesn't happen on deadlines. One evening I stood by the window and looked at the city lights, steady and unremarkable. The Silver Star sat behind me, out of sight, exactly where it belonged. Honor doesn't announce itself. It doesn't sparkle. It doesn't need witnesses. It just waits for someone willing to carry it when it becomes inconvenient. And family, real family, isn't the people who share your last name. It's the ones who don't sell you when the price is right. So here's what I want to know from you. If the people who raised you crossed a line you couldn't uncross, would you choose peace at any cost? Or would you choose truth and live with the fallout? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if stories about accountability, boundaries, and real justice matter to you, make sure you're subscribed for more. There's a moment in life when you realize something uncomfortable, doing the right thing, doesn't make you respected. It makes you inconvenient. Most people don't turn against you because you're wrong. They turn because you refuse to play along. In my family, the truth wasn't dangerous because it was shocking. It was dangerous because it disrupted a comfortable lie everyone depended on. And that's something a lot of people watching this already understand. If you've ever been the person who spoke up, set a boundary, or refused to pretend you know how fast the room can turn on you. Not with logic, with labels. You're too intense. You're making things awkward. You're taking it too personally. You're overreacting. Those labels aren't diagnoses. They're defense mechanisms. When people benefit from a broken system, the person who points it out becomes the problem. In my case, I wasn't punished for selling anything. I was punished for refusing to approve of it. That distinction matters. Approval is a currency most families trade in without realizing it. You get love access and protection as long as you don't challenge the narrative. The moment you do, the price goes up or the access gets revoked. And here's the hard truth most people don't want to hear. Many families don't run on honesty, they run on compliance. The moment you stop being compliant, you're no longer easy to love. People like to say, family should accept you no matter what. That sounds good. It also ignores reality. What families often accept isn't you, it's your usefulness. Are you helping them look successful? Are you keeping the peace? Are you protecting the image? As long as the answer is yes, you're welcome at the table. The moment the answer changes, so does your seat. That's when the accusations start. Not about what you did, but about who you are. Suddenly, your motives are questioned. Your stability is doubted. Your past is reinterpreted as a flaw instead of experience. In my story, it was PTSD. In yours, it might be anger issues being too sensitive or not letting things go. Different words, same function. Discredit the person so the truth doesn't have to be addressed. Here's something important to understand. If people attack your character instead of your facts, they've already lost the argument. They just don't want to admit it. This is where most people make their biggest mistake. They try to win approval back. They explain more. They soften their tone. They compromise their boundaries. They think, if I can just say it the right way, they'll understand. They won't. Because understanding isn't the issue. Comfort is, and comfort almost always wins, unless you decide it doesn't get to. Honor is not about being admired. It's about refusing to participate in something you know is wrong, even when silence would benefit you. That's why honor feels lonely. There's no applause. There's no guarantee it will work out cleanly. And there's no promise you'll be thanked for it. But there is one thing honor gives you that approval never will: self-respect. Self-respect doesn't come from being liked. It comes from knowing you didn't trade your values for access. A lot of people watching this are carrying guilt they shouldn't be carrying. Guilt for speaking up. Guilt for stepping away. Guilt for being labeled difficult. Let me be clear about something. If the only way to keep peace is to betray yourself, that peace is already broken. You didn't destroy the relationship. You exposed what it was built on. And exposure always feels violent to people who benefit from the dark. One of the hardest lessons I had to learn was this: being the villain in someone else's story doesn't mean you're wrong. It often means you stopped playing your assigned role. Not everyone is brave enough to do that. And not everyone who stays silent is weak. But many are afraid. Afraid of losing belonging. Afraid of being alone. Afraid of what happens when the illusion collapses. So here's the practical takeaway, not the inspirational one. If you're going to stand for truth, accept the cost up front. You may lose invitations. You may lose approval. You may lose people you thought would always be on your side. But what you gain is something most people never experience: integrity that doesn't depend on consensus. And that integrity becomes your compass when things get quiet. Because one day when the noise fades and everyone else is still negotiating their self-worth with other people's expectations, you'll know exactly where you stand. Not because you were celebrated, but because you didn't flinch. So let me ask you this, and really think about it before you answer. Have you ever been treated like the problem simply because you refused to agree with something you knew was wrong? And if that happened again today, would you choose approval or would you choose yourself? One of the most effective lies people are taught is this: if you set boundaries, you're being cruel. Cruel to your parents, cruel to your siblings, cruel to people who meant well. That lie keeps a lot of people trapped in situations that slowly hollow them out. Because here's what boundaries really are: they're not punishment, they're protection. And protection always feels offensive to people who benefited from having unlimited access to you. In my case, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't insult anyone. I didn't seek revenge. I simply stopped giving people access to my silence, my compliance, and my cooperation. That was enough to make me the enemy. A lot of families don't explode when conflict shows up. They suffocate it. They teach you that being good means being flexible, that love means endurance, that forgiveness means pretending nothing happened. But what they're really teaching is this: your discomfort is acceptable as long as it keeps everyone else comfortable. Boundaries interrupt that arrangement. And that's why people push back so hard. They don't argue your logic. They argue your tone. They don't dispute what happened. They question your reaction. They don't say you're wrong. They say you're hurting us. That shift is intentional, because if they can make your boundary look like an attack, they never have to examine their behavior. Here's something most people don't realize until it's too late: you don't owe access to anyone who has proven they will misuse it. Not because they're evil, not because they're monsters, but because patterns matter more than intentions. If someone repeatedly minimizes you, gaslights you, or sacrifices your well-being to protect their image, then the relationship is already transactional. They're just upset you stopped paying. Boundaries feel extreme to people who've never respected limits. To them, normal means unrestricted access. Your time, your emotional labor, your silence. So when you say no, they hear rejection. When you step back, they call it abandonment. When you stop explaining yourself, they call it disrespect. But none of that changes the truth. A boundary isn't an act of aggression. It's a refusal to continue participating in harm. And here's where many people get stuck. They think boundaries require permission. They don't. You don't need agreement. You don't need validation. You don't need the other person to understand. Understanding is optional. Safety is not. In my story, I didn't argue about whether the metal should have been sold. I didn't negotiate feelings. I documented facts. I removed access. I let systems handle what individuals refuse to. That approach works in real life too. When emotions are weaponized against you, clarity becomes your shield. Less explaining, more consistency, less reacting, more structure. Boundaries fail when they're emotional. They succeed when they're boring. The more dramatic you make them, the easier they are to attack. The calmer you are, the harder they are to undermine. Here's practical advice most people never hear. If someone only respects you when you're useful, they don't respect you. And if they only behave when you threaten consequences, the relationship isn't built on care. It's built on control. That doesn't mean you hate them. It means you see them clearly. Some people can adjust when boundaries are set. They learn, they grow, others don't. And when they don't, distance isn't cruelty. It's information. It tells you exactly how much of the relationship was dependent on your silence. A lot of viewers listening to this are wrestling with guilt. Guilt for not calling back. Guilt for not attending events. Guilt for not trying harder. Let me say this plainly: if someone has access to you and they keep using that access to diminish you, you are allowed to close the door. You don't owe endless chances to people who refuse accountability. Forgiveness does not require proximity. Love does not require self-erasure. And boundaries don't make you cold. They make you stable. They allow you to show up in the rest of your life without resentment leaking into everything else. In the end, the people who truly care about you will adapt. They might not like the boundary, but they'll respect it. The ones who don't were never upset about the distance. They were upset about losing control. So ask yourself this honestly, without rehearsing an answer that makes you look kind. Are you maintaining relationships because they're healthy, or because you're afraid of what happens when you stop explaining yourself? And if you stop today, who would actually try to meet you halfway, and who would only try to pull you back? Most people think justice is loud. They imagine yelling, public humiliation, a moment where everyone finally admits you were right. That version of justice looks good on social media. It rarely holds up in real life. Real justice is quieter than that. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't rush. And it doesn't need you to destroy yourself just to feel satisfied. In my story, there was no screaming match, no dramatic confession fueled by emotion, no victory speech. What happened was slower, colder, and far more permanent. That's usually how real accountability works. When people talk about revenge, what they're often describing is relief. Relief from being ignored. Relief from being powerless. Relief from being dismissed. But revenge doesn't actually fix those things. It just gives them a new shape. If you have to become cruel to feel whole again, you haven't won. You've just changed sides. The hardest lesson I learned wasn't how to expose wrongdoing. It was how to wait without rotting from the inside. Waiting doesn't mean doing nothing. It means preparing quietly while everyone else assumes you're weak. It means documenting instead of arguing. observing instead of reacting, letting patterns reveal themselves instead of forcing outcomes. Most people sabotage their own justice by rushing it. They confront too early. They vent to the wrong people. They give their opponents time to rewrite the narrative. Silence used correctly is not surrender. It's positioning. When you speak too soon, you give away leverage. When you act too emotionally, you become the story instead of the truth. That's why systems matter, not because systems are perfect, but because they don't care how charming someone is, how connected they are, or how convincingly they play the victim. Systems care about records, timelines, evidence. In my case, I didn't need to convince anyone of my character. I let documentation do the talking. That's an important distinction. You don't win by being believed. You win by being correct in ways that can't be ignored. A lot of people confuse justice with vindication. Vindication is emotional. Justice is structural. Vindication feels good for a moment. Justice changes what happens next. And here's the part that's uncomfortable to admit. Sometimes justice means you never get an apology. Sometimes it means the people who hurt you never fully understand the damage they caused. Sometimes it means the ending isn't neat. That doesn't mean it failed. It means it was real. In real life, closure isn't something someone gives you. It's something you stop needing. When accountability finally arrived in my story, it didn't feel triumphant. It felt quiet, heavy, final. The people responsible faced consequences that didn't require my commentary. Their lives adjusted without my input, and that's how I knew it was over. Not because I felt powerful, but because I felt free. Free from explaining, free from proving, free from hoping they would suddenly become different people. That freedom didn't come from winning an argument. It came from refusing to become smaller just to keep the peace. Here's what I want people listening to understand. You don't need to ruin someone publicly to reclaim your dignity. You don't need to broadcast every injustice to validate your pain. And you don't need to turn yourself into someone you don't respect just to make a point. If you're in a situation where you've been wronged, ask yourself this. Do I want revenge or do I want my life back? Because those two goals lead in very different directions. Revenge keeps you tethered to the person who hurt you. Justice untangles you from them. Revenge is reactive. Justice is deliberate. Revenge burns hot and fast. Justice is slow enough to last. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is step back and let consequences arrive without your help. Not because you're passive, but because you're precise. And precision always outlives rage. So if you're listening to this while carrying a story of betrayal, manipulation, or silence that cost you years of peace, hear this clearly: you don't owe anyone a dramatic ending. You don't owe anyone forgiveness on their timeline. And you don't owe anyone access to the version of you that was willing to endure harm. Your job isn't to punish, it's to protect what comes next. And when justice finally shows up, it won't look like a movie scene. It will look like calm. It will look like distance. It will look like a day where you realize you haven't thought about them in a while. And when you do, it doesn't hurt anymore. That's how you know you won. So here's the question I'll leave you with, and I hope you take a moment before answering it. If you stopped chasing revenge and focused instead on building a life that no longer needed validation from the people who hurt you, what would actually change, and who would you finally stop waiting on? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if stories about accountability, quiet strength, and real justice resonate with you, don't forget to subscribe for more.
Final note. This story is a work of fiction created by artificial intelligence to heighten drama and emotion. But the valuable lessons we discuss are entirely real and continue to happen to many people every day. If this style isn't for you, that's perfectly okay. Please feel free to look for other content that better suits your needs.